Today we're going to learn how to do the power clean, a classic but often butchered movement with several variations attached to it. Whenever I watch weightlifting videos online, I see a lot of confusion about what constitutes good form, or even what constitutes a power clean versus a full clean. Technically, when Olympic weightlifters talk about power cleans, they'll tell you that anytime you can catch a weight in a parallel squat or higher, that's a power clean. If you dip beneath parallel, it's no longer considered a power clean, but rather a full clean. The power clean is slightly less technical than the full clean because the focus is primarily on achieving a strong, powerful finish during the second pull and actually pulling the barbell as high into the air as possible, without the added difficulty of then having to quickly pull yourself into a deep, full squat beneath a rapidly descending barbell. On the contrary, the goal of a power clean is actually to catch the barbell in as shallow of a squat as possible. The absence of this technical aspect, coupled with the reduced weights that are used, gives you a greater margin for error and makes the learning curve a bit less steep. This reduction in technical difficulty, along with the primary focus being on achieving a powerful finish, makes the power clean a better choice for athletes or regular gym goers who are looking to enhance their ability to produce power. So, without further ado, let's get to my 5 easy steps to achieving a perfect power clean. Your feet should be about hip width apart and externally rotated slightly. Grab the bar just outside of your shins, preferably using a hook grip to allow for a more secure grip on the bar. Side note, having a solid grip on the bar is very important for power cleans because when you extend your hips and knees, the stronger your attachment to the bar through your hands is, the more of that power is going to transfer from your hips and legs into the barbell. A weak grip means a weak clean, so getting comfortable with the hook grip is important for this lift. Now, when you set your hips, you'll want them to be a little lower than they would be for a conventional deadlift. You don't want them to be as low as your knees, but you do want them to be low enough that you can keep your torso a bit more upright and get the quads more involved in the pull off the floor. This distinction is what makes a clean pull so much different from a conventional deadlift. In essence, it's an inefficient way of lifting the barbell from the floor. However, it's acceptable in this case because the weights that are being used are sub-maximal in this regard. And the purpose of lifting the bar from the floor is not to max out in that capacity, but rather to set yourself up for an efficient and explosive second pull. So tinker here with slightly different foot widths and degrees of external rotation, along with different hip heights, until you find what's most comfortable for you and allows you to pull the weight into the best position for the biggest power clean. As you initiate the pull from the floor, i.e. the first pull, the main thing you want to make sure of is that your hips and knees begin to extend at the same time and also that they extend at the same rate. Your weight should be positioned over the midfoot and you should stay on the quads, so to speak. The hips should not shoot up at all, otherwise your torso will get all lean forward, the weight will drift out in front of you, and you'll be completely out of position as you enter the transition over the knees. The goal for this step is simply to maintain as much of the setup position that you attained in step 1 as possible. A simultaneous extension of the hips and knees ensures a constant torso angle and puts you in optimal position to efficiently transition over the knees. As always, be sure to keep the bar as close to the shins as you can. As you enter the transition over the knees, your weight should gradually be shifting backwards from your midfoot towards your heels. As this is happening, your knees should continue to extend until they're almost but not quite fully extended, which will allow the barbell to remain close to the body and travel upward unimpeded in a straight line or slightly backward arcing pattern. As your knees extend, you'll be shifting more and more of the stress off of your quads and instead onto the posterior chain in order to allow you to reposition yourself for an explosive second pull. Once the bar clears the knees, it should be pulled in tightly and swept up the thighs until it's in position to begin the second pull. Simultaneously, the hips should be repositioned underneath of the shoulders and the knees should be rebent. This rebending of the knees is what's known as the double knee bend, and its execution is critical for allowing you to achieve a strong and proper position to execute the second pull from. A proper transition and double knee bend will result in the barbell resting about 2/3 of the way up the thighs, or even slightly higher, with the knees bent slightly as if about to perform a vertical jump, and the weight of the body once again shifted forward onto the midfoot. This position is sometimes referred to as the power position because it's the optimal position from which to attain a powerful and simultaneous terminal extension of the knees and hips and impart maximal vertical velocity onto the barbell. Now, one thing I want to note here is that the double knee bend is not a conscious effort. You should never tell yourself to rebend the knees during the transition phase. It should simply happen naturally as a consequence of proper body positioning and focusing on moving the barbell through the proper bar path as the movement progresses. So while a double knee bend is critical, it's an organic action that results from a correct movement pattern. As with all barbell lifts, your primary focus should be on proper positioning, and then the details will fall into place by themselves. This is the part of the power clean that gets all the glory, but just remember that the success of this step is built upon the backs of the 3 steps that came before it. If you do those 3 steps properly, then the second pull is simply the natural culmination of it all being pieced together. So now that you've successfully gotten the barbell over the knees and into position, it's time to finish strong. An explosive and simultaneous full extension of the knees and hips should be accompanied by a forceful shrugging of the shoulders, all in a single concentrated effort to impart as much vertical force onto the barbell in an instant as possible. For some people, the cue of thinking of this as a maximal jump seems to be helpful in achieving full extension of the hips and knees. Care should be taken not to bash the barbell out away from the body during the finish of the second pull. After the main muscle groups have done their job, the arms should be used to guide the barbell into position and to help the lifter pull their body down slightly to get underneath of the barbell. You should be sure not to pull with the arms too soon, i.e. before the hips and legs have achieved full extension and the barbell has become weightless as it moves along its vertical trajectory. If you pull with the arms prior to this event, you'll negate the transfer of force from the hips and legs into the barbell, and you'll be shortchanging yourself. Up until this point, the arms should simply act as hooks that connect the hips and legs to the barbell. Now that you've completed the second pull and begun guiding the barbell towards your shoulders, all you have to do at this point is get underneath of it and catch it. As I mentioned in step 4, the arms can be used to pull the body underneath the barbell. This is important to note because Olympic weightlifting is all about speed. Oftentimes, it's actually the lifters who can get underneath the barbell the fastest who are the best lifters in the world. And while the focus with the power clean is on the finish, and you won't ever be intentionally descending into a full squat, it's still important to get yourself underneath of the barbell quickly so you can be prepared to catch the weight and absorb all the forces that accompany that act. I mention all this because the cue of using the resistance of the barbell to leverage your body against can allow you to pull yourself down beneath it much faster than you otherwise could if you weren't actively attempting to leverage that resistance to your advantage. As you pull yourself down, you should simultaneously spread your feet out to about shoulder width or slightly wider so that your legs are prepared to absorb the impact, and you should whip your elbows around the barbell and up high until they're parallel to the floor. This is going to activate the thoracic extensors so that your upper back doesn't collapse as you catch the weight, and it's going to create a nice solid shelf for the barbell to rest on the front of your shoulders. And yes, the barbell should be caught on the front of your shoulders, not caught by the hands. Attempting to catch the bar with the hands is a good way to sprain a wrist from the massive compressive forces that would entail. Instead, the hands should simply be used for balance, and no more than the tips of the fingers need be under the barbell in order to stabilize it and get the upper back muscles firing. Seeing the whole thing in action, it should look something like this. One last thing I want to mention is the hang power clean. This is where you lift the bar up off the floor first, and then you set up for the clean with the bar already in your hands by lowering yourself into a position just below the power position that the second pull is executed from. Performing the lift from the hang position allows you to break up the first pull and the second pull and avoid the complicated transition over the knees. Overall, this makes it a much more user-friendly version of the lift. The clean is far easier to execute this way, and you're much less likely to have bar path issues. Starting off from the hang is a good way to learn how to execute a strong and unencumbered second pull because there are far fewer variables to be concerned with other than exploding into the pull as powerfully as possible. Once you become comfortable performing the lift this way, you can then try to transition to starting your cleans off from the floor. Or you can simply continue to execute them from the hang position for the rest of your lifting career. The only people who absolutely have to pull their cleans from the floor are those who wish to compete in Olympic weightlifting. For everybody else, the benefits that you get from doing the lifts from the hang versus from the floor will be pretty much the same because the greatest value of the Olympic lifts is in the execution of the second pull. One added benefit for athletes and regular gym goers is that it's easier to crank out a higher volume of reps from the hang, which is going to give you more repetitions to practice with and ultimately is going to give you a greater training effect. Also, performing the lift from the hang requires a slight eccentric prior to each rep, an eccentric which makes this movement more similar to jumping than performing the lift from the floor. This greater specificity means that performing a lift from the hang probably has a greater carryover to general athleticism. Really, the only drawback to doing hang power cleans versus power cleans from the floor is that once you get the technique down, you'll be able to lift slightly more weight from the floor. But in terms of people who have no aspirations to compete in weightlifting, this difference is probably not significant enough to matter. Ultimately, however, it's going to be a matter of personal preference which method you choose to use, or even if you choose to learn both ways. So there you have it. If you start off light and practice diligently and really focus on making the positions I outlined in these 5 steps become second nature to you, then you'll be power cleaning huge weights before you know it and with vastly better form than the majority of the gym-going population. Just be sure to focus on quality and clean movement here. Do less reps per set, but do more sets. If you really want to nail this movement, increase the frequency with which you perform it. It's not very taxing and it can be done multiple times per week. The more fresh, unfatigued reps you do, the better off you'll be. So good luck and happy power cleaning. I'll catch you guys next time.